Well, good evening, everyone. We are back in the book of Revelation. Tonight we are in chapter 7 of Revelation. Quick recap so we kind of know where we're at. It was written to the 7 churches in the Roman province of Asia. Quite frankly, there is I'm not going to say necessarily code, but there is things that they would understand that we would not necessarily understand immediately without studying it. If this first 7 chapters, we look at it, and it's the 7 angels, it's the 7 churches, it's the 7, 7, 7, 7 all over the place. And that is just an example of what they refer to as a number meaning completeness. The appropriate amount. That's kind of a opening to what we have to remember in the book of Revelation. What we have to remember in the book of Revelation is the overall message they're trying to get across. A lot of times in the book of Revelation, people get caught up on things that don't matter to the overall, that don't change the overall message of the book of Revelation. They can become fascinated. Well, who is the quote-unquote Antichrist? Well, who is the 144,000, which we'll talk about tonight? Who's the serpent? Who's this? Who's that? We as human beings can be naturally curious. There's nothing wrong with that. But we can't let that curiosity overshadow the message that is given to us. And in the message of Revelation is as clear then as it is today. And I'll go over it one more time. If you're a Christian, you're going to be persecuted at some point. You're going to have difficulty. You have to remember who God is, that He is with us. We have to stay faithful. If we do those things, it doesn't matter who the Antichrist is, who the serpent is, or what the 144,000 is, or any of this other stuff. Because if you remember who God is, you stay faithful through the persecution, you will be rewarded in heaven. Remember, this was written to some people that were being persecuted like we cannot understand. We cannot understand the persecution that they were under. So, it was written to them to reassure them, this is who God is. This is who I am. Remain faithful and you will be rewarded. I will be with you through difficult times. That's the message of the book of Revelation. Now, quite frankly, they could have ended the book already. Chapter 6 if they wanted to, or chapter 7 if they wanted to. God would have wanted to. However, we as He knows us, right? He made us. He created us. He knows we are curious. He can't write exactly what's going to happen, especially you don't want to be carrying that information around during the time of the Roman Empire. When you're talking about the Roman Empire, you might get in a little bit of trouble. We've discussed that and talked about that. So yes, he does go into some detail of what the future holds, with the caveat of it being, well, first of all, it's apocalyptic language, but it doesn't mean it's literal. It doesn't mean any of this is literal. So, and one of the ways, and, we talk the letters to the churches, this is who Jesus is, the letter to the churches, chapter 5, John gets to see what's going on in heaven. Chapter 6, they're opening the seals in heaven, and we might get to the 7th seal today, but a lot of people fall off the rails in chapter 6. They got it all going on, then all of a sudden, who's the rider on the gray horse. Well, everybody should know that was Clint Eastwood. Okay? We all saw, well, maybe we didn't all see the movie Pale Rider, but anyway. But that's how much we really need to be paying attention to who that specifically is. They're kind of explained, one is death, one is war, so forth. But trying to look, going, oh yeah, that must be, I remember when I was just out of high school buying a book and reading it and my mother laughing at me because it was a book explaining why Mikhail Gorbachev was the Antichrist and it had to do with his, birthmark up here and stuff like that. And she's like, come on. And she was right. And people today saying, oh, well, this guy's the Antichrist or this or that. You know what we ought to say? Come on. Give me a break. You don't know that. But anyway, there is a lot of figurative language. And I wanted to point out, since it's been 2 weeks, we talked about the skies going dark and this and that and, all this. There'll be a whole bunch more of that type language today. But I pointed out at the end 2 weeks ago, that wasn't new language. Every bit of that language had already been used in the Old Testament when God was describing, through the prophets, the destruction of other empires, including Babylon specifically. And so here is a huge danger that messes up a lot of people, and most people with the book of Revelation. They read this and they're going, this is literal, this is. And they hadn't read the Bible. Or they've only read a little bit of it. And they don't know that this type of language has already been used. And it's figurative language. So they get off that, we're going to have this big meteor come down, which we'll talk about tonight. And it's going to destroy this wormwood. I wonder which one is wormwood out there flying around that's going to destroy the earth. Trying to make this all fit into literal stuff when it is not. So, last week they opened 6 seals. 2 weeks ago, opened 6 seals. Of course, the 4 horsemen, and then, of course, the others. And tonight, we're starting on chapter 7. And it's talking about the 144,000 people that get to go to heaven. Now, is that figurative or literal? Well, let's talk about it. All right, chapter 7, verse 1. After this, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth to prevent any wind from blowing on the land or on the sea or on any tree. Then I saw another angel coming up from the east, having the seal of the living God. He called out in a loud voice to the 4 angels who had been given power to harm the land and the sea. He says, do not harm the land or the sea or the trees until we put a seal on the forehead of the servants of our God. That's another one people like to chase. But anyway, verse 4. And he says, then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all of the tribes of Israel. From the tribe of Judah, 12,000. From the tribe of Reuben, 12,000. From the tribe of Gad, 12,000. From the tribe of Asher, 12,000. From the tribe of Naphtali, 12,000. From the tribe of Manasseh, 12,000. From the tribe of Simeon, 12. From the tribe of Levi, 12. From the tribe of Issachar, 12. From the tribe of Zebulun, 12. From the tribe of Joseph, 12. From the tribe of Benjamin, 12. Okay, so those are the only people going to heaven. Did you know there's actually people that teach that? There's only going to be literally 144,000 people in heaven. Yeah. Yeah. Jehovah's Witnesses are one of them. Only 144,000, that's it. I was talking to Steve Tuesday, and he goes, yeah, well, if there's only 144,000 going to ever get into heaven literally, we might as well just stop everything we're doing because they've already had that many that have been saved. And well, quite truthfully, That is the case. But what does all this mean? First of all, it's not literal, only 144,000. Why? Well, if you keep reading in the book, you'll find out, and we'll see that here in a minute. But we have to remember there were numbers just like us. We go, lucky number 7. People are in the United States are familiar with that. Well, guess what? The Jewish people at the time had numbers that kind of represented things. And 12 was also a number symbolizing God's people. Think about the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 apostles. You take 12 and you square it from the tribes, from the new. What do you have? What's 12 times 12? 104. Noah, what's 12 times 12? 144. I know he knows it. So you get 144,000. Well, guess what? 1,000 of the day symbolized vast, uncountable multitudes or completeness on a grand scale. So you take 144, you multiply it by 1,000 representing completeness on a grand scale, you have 144,000. That's where you come up with the number. The conclusion basically is 144,000 is symbolically represents the entirety of God's redeemed people. Both Jew, Gentile, the whole 9 yards. And how are you sure about that, Tim? Well, first of all, if they were being literal, why didn't they use the 12 tribes? You think, oh, they did. No, they didn't. Go back and look at that list of tribes. Where's the tribe of Dan? It's not in there. Where's this Manasseh and Joseph come from? It's not a complete list of the 12 tribes of Israel, which suggests this is symbolic, not literal. There's irregularities are often, when you see an irregularity, oftentimes it emphasizes the spiritual instead of the literalness of something, if you will. Now, again, like I said a minute ago, there are some that believe that it's 144,000 total. That makes you wonder. There's basically no one alive today, which doesn't make any sense. We also know from Scripture elsewhere that God wants everyone to come to a knowledge of His saving grace. He would prefer all of us to be saved. He wants us all to be saved. Why would He set a limit on the number of people that could be saved? Also, besides Jehovah's Witness, I mentioned that a second ago, there are some dispensational premillennialists that also teach that it's only 144,000, period. And we have not yet hit the 1,000-year reign, quote unquote, of Jesus on the earth. They think He's going to come back and have a literal, physical throne here on earth, and that He is going to sit on that literal, physical throne here on earth. They also teach the tribulation, 7 years where you got to live with all the bad stuff. And that brings up another thing. Verse 3, it said, "Do not harm the land or the sea or the trees until we put a seal on the foreheads of the servants of God." Ask them what that is. What is the seal on the head? What does it look like? Anybody know? No one knows? Well, we're actually told what it is. Later on, in Revelation 14:1, describes the 144,000 standing with the Lamb, having His name and His Father's name written on their foreheads. We don't even know how to write their names. So no one, if they try to teach you or tell you what that is, they don't know. They don't know. I remember watching a movie back in the day, where the cross and the switchblade and several other apocalyptic things about Revelation, and they came up with this thing, and you were tattooed and all this stuff. That's not the case. We have to remember, what's the purpose of the seal? It's God saying, these people are mine. That's all it is. That's it. Now, God's going to protect them. God's going to be with them. But this isn't something we're going to be walking around the streets with, and people walk by going, oh, that's not the case. So as we continue to move on, Romans 14, now keep in mind, some people talk about this is the yin to the yang, or the whatever to the whatever of the mark of the beast. That will come up later in Revelation 13. We'll cover that more when we get there. But however, it is generally recognized and believed and understood that is God's invisible but ultimate stamp of ownership of his children. Now we move on into verse 9. This is what I was talking about a minute ago. They talk about 144,000 people. And then verse 9, literally the next verse says, after this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne of God, the Lamb, and standing before the throne and before the Lamb. I held off. I specifically didn't read that part until we got through the 144,000 part there. But people want to go, well, it's only 144,000 people will ever get to heaven. But then we see, all of a sudden you can't count the number. That even, just taking it in context will point to the fact that we don't know we don't know the number of people, but it is the right number. And that we do know that it is not literally 144,000. And it says, they were wearing white robes and holding palm branches in their hands. And they cried out in a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. White, purity, righteousness, the color of the robes. Palm branches, actually, at the time, were a symbol of victory, by the way. And then in verse 11, it continues on. All the angels were standing around the throne and around the elders and the four living creatures. They fell down on their faces before the throne and worshiped God, saying, Amen. Praise and glory and wisdom and thanks and honor and power and strength be to our God forever and ever. Amen. Then one of the elders asked me, being John, these in white robes, who are they and where did they come from? John answered, or I answered, Sir, you know. Okay. Why would he answer that? Why would he ask him that question? I don't know. What does it show us, though? It did show John being a little humble, though, didn't it? He's like, I don't know, man. And it goes on and says, and he said, these are they who have come out of the great tribulation. Uh-oh, there's that word. These are those who come out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Okay, so there it is, the word tribulation. Well, first of all, what does that mean? What does tribulation mean? Well, thlipsis is the word. It's the Greek word, thlipsis. And it means a pressing together, pressure, oppression, affliction, distress, are all words that thlipsis is translated into in the Bible. Matter of fact, it's also associated with a wine press. It's talking about great pressure. It's not talking about a 7-year period in that premillennialist claims that's yet to happen, where all the Christians are being taken off of the earth, and then everybody's going to fight. They were raptured, by the way. That's not what it is. They come up with this stuff, but they don't have literal basis to put it on. Remember, if you will, Revelation 2:10, when John was writing to the church at Smyrna. It says, "Do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer. I tell you, the devil will put some of you in prison to test you, and you will suffer persecution for 10 days. By the way, it depends if you have NIV or if you have King James or if you have ASV or whatever. When he says there, you will suffer persecution for 10 days, guess what? That's philipsis, the exact same word. And of course, I'm going to finish that verse. Of course, it says, be faithful, even to the point of death. One of the major underlying points of the book of Revelation. Be faithful, even to the point of death, and I will give you life as your victor's crown. It's the same word, philipsis. We have to remember in context. I love it, when we stop and look at the overview of this. God's in control, y'all. We're going to have hard times. We will have difficult times. We have a family in the church today that lost their son within the last week. They're going through a hard time. The message for the churches is the same for the message for them. God's with you. Stay faithful. You will be rewarded. Don't let the difficulty here on earth make you turn from God. That's what it is basically saying. So we move on to verse 15. Therefore, they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in the temple. And he who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. Never again will they hunger. Never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat down on them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. He will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eye. Reassuring. It's reassuring. Yeah, it's hard right now. You're going to have some problems. But this is what's going to happen. You won't hunger. You won't thirst. You won't get burnt up you won't get burnt up like a lobster at the beach. Well, you won't have pain, really. Why? Because the Lamb is going to take care of you. He will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. What a personal statement. Think about that, if you will. And God will wipe away the tears from their eyes. This isn't some distant God. This isn't some God that's standing there before unknown numbers and doesn't know what's going on in each and every one of them and can take care of each and every one of them and each and every one of us, because that's the truth. Let's move on into chapter 8. When he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Okay, first of all, half an hour, it's described as a brief period of time. They said half an hour because that's a brief period of time for us. So, you shouldn't be setting your watch by it. But what does it mean? What does it mean? What's the deal with silence in heaven? We just saw where they were all praising God. Well, there's many a theory about it. Some as simple as adding effect. Some talking about taking a moment and preparing for the prayers to follow. And some say it's a time that represents God's patience with us. Here's the real question. Does it matter? Does any of that matter? Which the answer is to us getting to heaven or God winning? Of course it doesn't. us as humans, we want to figure everything out. We have to be real careful about what we think we figure out and what we want to argue about. Quite frankly, unless we're told explicitly, we have to be very careful. You know, I was getting an email here recently, and I kept looking at it. It's this organization that it's a missions organization. It's called Jephthah's Daughters. I'm like, okay. Or the Daughters of Jephthah. And I'm like, why in the world did they pick that name? Still hadn't figured it out. But you know, I knew a bunch of people that argued till they were blue in the face about how Jephthah's daughter died. Doesn't matter how Jephthah's daughter died. That's not what the whole story is about. The story is there in the Bible for us as a warning about making promises without being real careful how you do it and what you're promising. Verse 2 says, "And I saw the 7 angels who stood before God, and the 7 trumpets were given to them." 7. "And then another angel who had a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense to offer, with the prayers of all of God's people on the golden altar in front of the throne." There's the prayers that some are saying it was a preparation for that. "The smoke and the incense together with the prayers of God's people went up before God from the angel's hands. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and hurled it on the earth. And there came pearls of thunder, rumbling, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Then the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared to sound them. The first angel sounded the trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down on earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. The second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain, all ablaze, was thrown into the sea. A third of all the sea turned into blood. A third of all living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. The third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from the sky on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star was wormwood. I put in there, wormwood is a bitter substance. A third of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that had become bitter. The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them turned dark, a third of the day without light, and also a third of the night. As I watched, I heard an eagle that was flying in midair call out in a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the trumpet blasts about to be sounded by the other 3 angels." Okay, a couple of things as we start to wrap up here. Whew, that was some destruction, wasn't it? Well, first of all, it wasn't everything. God didn't destroy everything. He just metaphorically destroyed a lot. All the third of the vegetation, third of the water, third of the people, third of the animals, third, on and on and on. But here's what I'm getting at. What I was getting at a minute ago. We talked about this. We talked about how people, they're looking for that star. It's going to be called wormwood. And they're looking for this and that to happen. Let's consider a couple of things, if you will, with me. Exodus 9:23 through 24. God sent thunder and hail and rain, and fire rained down to the earth. It struck all the men and animals and broke every tree. Exodus 7:20 through 21. Moses struck the water of the Nile, and all the water in the river turned to blood. The fish died, and the Egyptians could not drink the water. Exodus 15:23 and Jeremiah 9:15. The people could not drink the water because it was bitter. And Jeremiah prophesies God will feed Israel with wormwood and give them poisonous waters. Exodus 10, 21 through 23, the 9th plague. Thick darkness came over the land for 3 days, 3 days. But just like 2 weeks ago, and I talked about how these same sort of things have been used before. These are not, whoa, these are in Revelation, so all of a sudden these are going to be literal. It's not literal. Isaiah 13:10, talking about the prophecy against Babylon. The stars of heaven and their constellations will not show their light. The rising sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. Isaiah 34, 4 through 5. All the stars in the sky will be dissolved and the heavens rolled up like a scroll. All the starry hosts will fall like withered leaves from the vine, like shriveled figs from the fig tree. My sword has drunk its fill in the heavens. See, it descends in judgment on Edom, the people I have totally destroyed. So we're talking about Babylon one time. Now we're talking about Edom. Jeremiah 4, 23 and 24. I looked at the earth, and it was formless and empty, and at the heavens, and their light was gone. I looked at the mountains, and they were quaking. All the hills were swaying. Just a couple verses later in 28, it says, therefore the earth will mourn, and the heavens above will grow dark. Ezekiel 32, 7 through 8. When I snuff you out, I will cover the heavens and darken their skies. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon will not give its light. All the shining lights in the heavens I will darken over them. I will bring darkness over your land, declares the sovereign Lord. In Joel 2, 28 and following. I'm going to do for time, I'm going to skip down to verse 30. It says, I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and billows of smoke. The sun will be turned into darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Why did I cover all of that stuff 2 weeks ago? Why did I cover it again today? Because the biggest problem with people properly understanding the book of Revelation is people taking figurative language as literal. And they get completely caught up in the figurative. And they forget to look at the message that's being delivered by the book itself, being delivered by God, which is you're going to have a hard time at times. God is in control. God is with you. Stay faithful, and you will be rewarded. That message was important to the people being persecuted by the Romans of the time this book was written, and that message is important to Christians today. What a wonderful thing that we have a Savior that loves us enough to help try to prepare us and to assure us He is with us and to assure us of what lays ahead when we stay faithful. The whole book of Revelation is God saying, hey, it's going to be tough. Stay faithful. I'm with you. You're going to be rewarded. Next week, we got through two chapters tonight. Can you believe that? But next week, we will pick up on chapter 9. Now, if you have any specific questions, we can talk about them here in a minute. And or / if there's something more detailed, we can touch on it next week as well when we begin. But thank you all for being with us tonight. Remember, we love you, and we hope you can join us at some point in person. Take care, all.